Welcome to the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This podcast is sponsored by Vantage Circle, the simple and AI-powered rewards and recognition platform for employee engagement.
It's hard to believe that there are still some companies that undervalue or ignore internal communications. However, they do exist and we can see their businesses suffer. The fact is, solving internal communications offers a sense of peace to the office and makes it more efficient and enjoyable. An effective internal communication plan enables organizations to shift from chaos to calm, especially in these critical times of COVID-19. Hi everyone, I'm Shushmita and welcome to another episode of the Vantage HR Influencers Podcast. This time we're back to talk about redefining internal communications in 2022. And I can't wait to introduce our guest today, Neha Kothari, the Director of Internal Communications at BYJU'S. Welcome to the show, Neha.
Thank you so much, Sushmita.
Okay, so before we start with the topic today, Neha, about internal communications, now how to redefine internal communications in 2022, it would be great if you can brief us about your journey in the corporate world. Like, how did you come into internal communications?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I started off as a journalist. I started my career with Times Now. I was a TV correspondent and I loved everything about news. I loved that we could bring out people's stories. We could tell them what the world is all about. And from there on, I also got into a little bit of an entrepreneurial stint. I was in Calcutta for about 4 years. I had my own venture out there. And after that, I knew that my calling still was in communications. So I moved to Bangalore. And after that, I was trying to interview for radio, actually. And then one of my friends happened to be, at Infosys, and she told me there's a test that we're doing at Infi. So why don't you just take it up? So I told her that I don't know how I'll fit into the corporate world. But she told me, why not just take it up and then we'll see. So Infosys then happened out of serendipity because I think I was meant to be in a corporate world. Everything that I did as a journalist, I took my learnings of that and took it back to the corporate world. And especially in an organization like Infi, right? There was everything for what a journalist could do. There was radio channel, there was a TV channel, there was communication. So I was in the heart of communications. And there with about 7 years at Infi, then finally I decided to do something different. I moved into, the startup bug also bit me. So I thought, why not get into a company which is now growing, which is not a startup technically anymore. It's almost like an MNC now. So I thought, why not just try it? Because I completely believed in the passion that they were onto, which is about making millions learn. And that's what hit the right chord with me. So here I am at BYJU'S after, close to about 8 years of dabbling into various other things. So I decided, why not just take this up as a challenge as well?
Right. Neha, just like in any other relationship, a lack of communication can cause a lot of problems for an organization. It can be hard to recognize signs of poor communication, but it has to be pointed out before the damage is done. So what are the most common deep-rooted internal communication loopholes or common pitfalls that corporations make in their communication strategy?
See, well, absolutely, pre-COVID, right? Internal communications was more so looked at as a good to have function, right? But COVID changed that for all of us with headline stress all around. We had an unknown enemy that we were fighting, but it was a common enemy across the globe that plagued our lives. But it was a completely new challenge, a challenging scenario that got companies to understand the power of relevant communication. We had to think on our feet. We didn't have any playbook or a manual. It was all, very important that we very, very critical that we share the information that we have and we reassure our employees. In fact, we had seen to a point where it came that, our employees started relying on the information that we were sharing with them rather than going through what was coming to them either on social media or in the news. Because that level of confidence we were able to bring about. And I think that changed the game for us. And fortunately and proudly, I can say that now internal communications has a seat at the table. We are at the right place, right time. And you spoke about the loopholes or the deficits, right? See, the time that we are living in right now, there is still uncertainty. One day we're working from home, one day we're working from office, and then we go back to working from home again, right? Because the brief is changing every minute for all of us, and when you're facing a scenario like this, which is heading to become an endemic, right? We don't know if there is ever going to be an end point. So we have to adapt absolutely into a mode where we have that agility to get into the uncertainty of it. So, when we send out something today from the internal comms desk, there are chances that tomorrow we will revoke it, right? So to counter this, companies definitely should have an architectural agility, enable. They need to be flexible in thought and action, and that's what will be a game changer.
Yeah.
With a continuous changing landscape, it's really imperative that a communication team listens to the employees, and most critical aspect in devising any engagement strategy is to have your employees involved. Because at the end of the day, this communication is for them, right? So it could mean crowdsourcing. It could mean that, you talk to your employees, listen to what they are saying, listen to what, they are giving you as inputs. And over and above that, you also need to have a buy-in from the leadership, because they are the ones who need to walk the talk. If they don't believe in something that you are devising as a strategy, it is not going to work. So you have to ensure you convince your leadership, you convince your employees. Only then any plan, any engagement activity, any campaign that you devise is going to work. Because at the end of the day, everyone in the organization needs to cascade that message. They need to live and breathe it. So while I wouldn't say that there are multiple problems in the field of communication right now, the most important one is, how do we ensure our communication is clear, crisp, relevant, most importantly, and consistent? Right. And that's the aim that all of us should have.
Yeah. So for all this efficiency in internal communications, Neha, do you use any tools in your organization?
Absolutely, we do. See, it's very critical that, we have multiple tools. In fact, we are not living in the era where only one email will work. Right. We have to look at a multi-channel approach. There will be times when you will need to put something out on the intranet. So your intranet has to be really strong. And I believe that intranet should never be one-sided. You should have an intranet that supports an employee voice as well. So when you have an intranet, when there are companies that are deciding on which intranet platform to go, whether they're building it internally or whether they go with a third-party vendor, you need to have a platform where you give employees a channel to come back and voice their opinion as well. It has to be a two-way channel of communication, because emails and, your WhatsApp messages, or it could be your podcasts, all of it, more so it happens that it all becomes one-sided, where the company is just trying to say what they want to say. But are we giving them a platform? That is most critical. Because the moment you start doing that, then you know that your message actually has an impact. You know that your message is actually being heard, or there is going to be some relevance of it to the employee that you're devising it for. So channels, definitely, we have to devise them very smartly. And like I said, it has to be a multiple channel approach. Not one channel will not do the trick for us anymore.
So how do you look into employee engagement, Neha, at your organization? That has to be a critical part right now, isn't it?
Absolutely. See, I think most importantly is listen to your employee. And the reason why I keep repeating it is, we can come up with multiple strategies, but let me tell you, the only strategy that will actually work is empathy. That's the strategy we need. The moment you start listening, acknowledging your employees, you will be able to hit the nail on the head. To be very honest, communications is not rocket science. It's actually a human science.
Sure.
You need to be able to read people, and only then people will read what you write. Because as a communicator, what's your main goal? You want people to read what you're writing. You want people to absorb it. You want people to consume the content the way you want it. And also there has to be a call to action, right? And the other part of the communication is, or engagement that we say for a communications teams per se, is you have to also think of an overall holistic view. So for an employee, it's not just about their career growth, right? There are different personas that you will have in your organization. Employees can be, some might want career growth, some might want compensation, some might just be looking at an overall holistic growth, which could be about your, health and wellness.
Depending on their values. Yeah.
Absolutely. And today we are in a world where mental wellness is also very critical as much as is physical wellness. It's so uncertain that you don't know what's going to happen, and uncertainty always gives way to anxiety. So our engagement strategies or our employee engagement, campaigns should have a holistic picture, or should have a holistic view. We cannot rely on saying that, okay, I'm only going to talk about career to my employees, or I'm going to tell them, hey, your growth is fantastic in the company. But we have to also showcase to them how their mental health, their physical wellness, everything is important to us. And basis all of these pillars, we have to come up with, engagement strategies. And another most important pillar, I would say, in today's world, because our homes, our living rooms, our bedrooms, our dining tables have become our workspaces, right? Your families should also be involved. How do you ensure that a communication strategy also has some space for your family in it? Can you do something where you're involving family? Absolutely. You have to recognize the fact that we have actually invaded the family space, not the other way around. We keep asking our family to keep quiet when we have calls, but then can you involve them in one of the meetings? If there is a recognition that we are doing for the employee, can you involve the family? can you get the family to be a part of teaching some skill to others as well? Because sometimes you don't know the kind of talent that family members come with. So I think it's most critical that all of these aspects are looked at, because one strategy or just one way of thinking is just blindsiding our own selves. So how do we ensure we look at an engagement strategy from the point of view of it having business goals as well?
Right.
So when I say business goal, I basically mean is that if I know for my business, retention and productivity is something which is very critical, something which my business actually wants, something which my leadership actually is looking at, it is important for a communications team to align themselves with the issue as well. For example, all of us have heard about this great resignation. We've read enough and more articles.
Yes.
Now, as a communications team, it's very critical that we look at how this is also becoming an era of great opportunities. Because if somebody is leaving from somewhere, they are joining somewhere, right?
Yeah. So if you are giving something very great, something really good, then you definitely you can bring in the best of the best employees.
Absolutely. And how do you showcase that to your employees? How do you communicate your value proposition? And how do you also showcase that to the potential hires? Because today your employees who are there in the organization are the brand ambassadors. They are the ones who carry the tag of your company outside. So it will be a reflection of what you are doing internally. So it is extremely critical that we have, as a communications team, align ourselves with people. That's the most important thing. And next, with business. What are the business goals, business strategies? How do we work towards it? And how do we showcase actually what the company has in store for you when you want to join or when you want to stay back in the company? Because the opportunities are, they're numerous outside, right? If you see the kind of, talent that we have and the demand that we have outside, it's great. So retention in these times is very critical. And remotely, it's very tough. But if you devise the right kind of strategy, if you have the right kind of mindset, I think it's not too far that we will be able to retain our people and keep them happy as well.
As well as bring in some really good talent from the market who are waiting for their opportunities. Right. So Neha, do you think internal communication, all these efforts differ in small-sized organizations from the biggies?
I don't think it actually differs much, because I've been a part of a very large organization previously. We had around 250,000 employees across the globe. And now I'm part of a startup. Well, it's not a startup anymore, but still the issues of problem statements everywhere will be more or less similar, right? What I think companies have started acknowledging, whether they are big or small, is that employee engagement and communication in this remote setup is of utmost priority. If your employees are engaged, productivity is going to be high. And if business is doing well, you can flow it back into the system. And in turn, you benefit the employees again. So it's a loop. So fortunately, big and small organizations, by and large, now know the power of good communication and the issues that might crop up if there is a lack of it. So there is acknowledgement, at least, And while there can be multiple approaches, like you're either centralizing or decentralizing communication in small and large organizations respectively, but everyone is working towards one single goal. So I wouldn't say there is too much of a difference. The difference only might be in the team size, I would say. But otherwise, I think companies know now that it's very critical that you have a strong communication strategy if you want to stay in the game.
So considering having a strong strategy for communication, it would be, I can say that it's a myth that, internal communications, it can lead to a failure of small size organizations, especially when you're working from home, isn't it?
Absolutely. See, if you don't have a strong communication strategy, whether big or small, if you're not able to go back and tell your employees what exactly...
If you're not going to be able to communicate,
you're not going
eventually going to fail anyway.
Absolutely. Because
regardless of its size,
the situation that we are in today, right? The pandemic, nobody knew anything about it. That's why it creates anxiety. It's a similar situation in organizations. If people don't know what you're doing for them, if people don't know, whether you care about them, you care about their growth as an organization, then they obviously will have different places to look for, right? Wherever they're getting all of these things, they will move there. Because gone are the days where, we're only talking about somebody working in a company for 25, 30 years. We've seen our parents' generation do that. But today, if somebody completes a year or a 5-year milestone, companies think it's a big deal because you've been able to retain that person because of the demand and supply loop. That's about it.
Again, Neha, how do you handle company secrets successfully? We talk about transparency at the workplace all the time, but don't you think that there are always a few things that are confidential to management only?
See, well, I wish we all had a recipe for this, or we all knew how to go about this. But to be very honest, as a communications team, you are privy to a lot of information that you get from management, and sometimes some of this information will have a huge impact and can even change the game for the company, right? And especially if you're a listed company, then there are a lot of repercussions as well if something gets leaked. So as a leader, you have to educate your team as somebody who's heading the communications team. And when I say educate, I mean you empower them. You have to tell your team that the kind of impact that the news has, they should know that the difference they are making by being a part of the communications team, because everything that we write today internally, what we say, will affect so many stakeholders, whether internal or external, and like they say, right, with great power comes great responsibility. So it's very important that your team knows the kind of impact that they're going to generate. And the second most aspect that I at least see is even you have to have your leadership to be on the same page. When media says that a highly placed source in the company, right, without corroborating it to a person, most of the times we know it is somebody from within who has shared this information outside, right? So how do you also make your leaders take ownership for it? And when you have your stake in something, right, you will always want to safeguard it. When I know that, okay, I actually take ownership, this is my company, only then will people know that, okay, there is something that I should share or should not share. There will be leaks, there will be information that will go out, that will slip out. And one way to counter it is, how do you enable your employees beforehand? So if there is some news that you want to share with the external world, at the same time, can you also share it with your employees? Because most of the times employees get to know information only from social media or news.
Right.
Yes. So how do you counter it? How do you, and you should look at proactive communication, because most of the times what companies do is reactive communication. We always look at, okay, something we've sent out, oh, now there is already a hush-hush, or there's everybody in the organization is talking about it. So proactively, how do you counter it? Can you do something where you have a set of employees where you share this information with them and, give them that power that you have this information, or we need your inputs, or if it is something that's going to change a lot of things for us, then how do you ensure that that's similar, or at the same time you share that information internally as well, so that they know I've got this from my company. This is the right statement and I shouldn't believe in what media, or I shouldn't believe in hearsay. So multiple approaches to this, but despite that, see, there will be leaks, because sometimes, like I said, when you have information at hand, right, you always feel that you have power at hand, and most of them would like to flaunt it. So this is something that, most comms teams, external and internal communications team are working towards. And hopefully someday, because the era that we live in is all about social media, it's all about news coming out first and who gets their hand on it first. So hopefully someday we will be able to have better answers to this.
Yeah, so basically, I think it's all about the feeling of ownership that an employee will feel, and then he or she wouldn't like to, personally, to spill any company secrets to the outside of the world.
Absolutely. Okay. See, when you have your own business, right, you will do everything to safeguard it, and that's the feeling that you should have. How do you make them feel that you are an entrepreneur within? Absolutely.
So Neha, being a leader in your organizations, you need to know if you're supporting and challenging your staff in the right ways, or if, despite your good intentions, you need to know if you're holding them back. So how do you manage to get honest employee feedback in your organization?
Well, fortunately for me, I was a journalist. It's a tag that I'll always carry very close to my heart. So I think like a journalist as well, You have to, when I say think like a journalist, is you have to have an unbiased view. That is what journalists are supposed to do. You have to collect information, you have to gather every news bit that you have, and then you do the analysis and not jump into any conclusions, right? And another part is that you have to listen to water cooler conversations. These are very critical conversations that happen at water coolers or near the coffee machines or near the copier machines, right? That's where people are actually talking about what's going on in the company. So you have to keep your ears open out for it. And next point is you should truly show that you care, because if it's not going to be honest, if your approach is not going to be honest when you talk to people, it's not going to make a difference. So what I also look at doing, right, is this is a practice that I follow, that, across the company, where no matter which company that I've worked in, across different regions, I make a, effort to connect with people there who are there on the ground, and just in general conversations, talk to them about how things are going. So they become like these citizen journalists for me, So if there is some burning issue that comes up, they immediately tell me that, this is, I think, this issue could escalate, or this is something that I've heard. So you have to have these, people around who you are able to tell that what I'm doing is for a reason, and the reason is the betterment of the company. And with that, I will be able to help you too. And if you can make a difference in 1 or 2 scenarios, trust me, people will automatically start coming back to you. That's why I said think like a journalist, because if you have your sources in the right place, you will have a pulse of what's happening on the ground. Because as a communications professional, it is very critical that you take this piece of information, go back to your leadership and say that, these are the situations that I see on ground. This is the positive feedback. This is negative feedback that we're getting. And this is neutral. But you never know when the neutral can switch and take the form of a negative feedback. So when you're able to do that and highlight situations or scenarios, in advance, you obviously are helping the management and you're helping employees too. So, because no matter how many surveys you collect, no matter, how many pulse checks you do on the ground, but what will at the end of the day help is these honest one-to-one conversations that you have with people. So, yes, so the internal communications team really needs to have their feet on ground, talk to people and, work like these reporters across.
Brilliant, Neha. So we are already, moving towards the end of this podcast. So would you like to share some key trends in internal communication that you see coming up in the following months of 2022?
Absolutely. There are, in fact, multiple trends. When I, at the start of every year, even I think of how I am going to, ensure that I speak to my team. What is it that I need to talk to them about? So there are some things that even I have in mind. And initially also we discussed, right? One big trend that I see is this multiple channel approach. You cannot just rely on email communication anymore. So you have to have a very robust intranet in place, an intranet which is also giving them information, which is also helping them with engagement, also giving them a platform to say what they want to say, right? And then you obviously will have emails, you'll have podcasts from the leadership. You need to get your leaders to come and do some of these podcasts because you have to humanize your leaders. What happens is we meet our leaders, say maybe once a quarter or, in some scenarios, once in 6 months or once a year. You actually don't know the real side of the leader. So it's very difficult to believe them if they just randomly then send you one mail at the start of a new year. So how do you humanize them? How do you ensure that they're close to their people? And videos, obviously, right? The other thing is it has to be mobile enabled because on the go is need of the hour. How many of us actually sit throughout the day on our laptops? Because most of the content that we get is on our phones. So how do you ensure your communication is enabled on the mobile as well? And the next thing is, no matter what you do, right, it has to be flexible and scalable. If you see that any of the information that you are sending out is not working with people, there is, because we measure it by the number of people who've seen it or the number of people who've liked a particular communication or shared it with folks. If you see that things are not working out, be flexible to course correct. Be flexible and be smart enough to say that, this is not working and let's immediately change something, get some feedback on the ground. Because only then you will, be able to give the people the right thing or things that they want to see, right? And the next part is that one size fits all approach will not work. You have to tailor make your content, and that is the approach that will click with your employee base. And what I mean by that is, see, your target audience is, going to be very different across organizations that you work or within an organization itself. For example, in the organization that I'm currently in, if my target audience age bracket is 22 to 24-year-old, then how do I ensure that the content, what I give them, they will consume? How do I keep it bite-sized? How do I make it look like, say, an Instagram post? How do I make it look as simple as a tweet? Because I know that is what they consume on a daily basis in their personal space. So how do you immediately adapt to that? And how do you put yourself in their shoes to see that if I got this message, would I consume it? If this came to me, would I click on it? Because clickbait subject lines will only take you that far. So how do you ensure you empathize, put yourself in the shoes of the person who's going to read the content? Trust me, that's what's going to make the difference.
Yes,
and the last part of what I see as a big trend, because the world that we are living right now, which is, sometimes office, sometimes workplace, or sometimes you're at home. So in this hybrid environment, right, there should be a consistent message. And when I say that, what I mean is when employees come to work, because there are some organizations that were up until last week still working from the office, which is we were also working from the office. So what you are showing them in physical space, are you also showing them that in the digital world too? So for example, when you log in on the intranet, are you seeing the company's values, the stories, or the standees that you might have put up, in an out-of-home advertising situation? Are you doing the same on digital world as well? When you open something, is there a pop-up that comes in? Can you read something about the company values? Can you see if there is a campaign that's happening? You have to blend the physical and the digital world and show the people a consistent message across, because that consistency is what will ensure that it'll create stickiness in the minds of people that, yeah, when I came to office, this is what I saw. Because why do we divide people when they are in a digital environment? If you are doing something in a physical environment, which could be like, office parties or some get-togethers, why can't we do the same thing in the digital world as well? It could be as simple as a pizza party with your team. We, in fact, encourage a lot of our leaders to do that. We ask them to, on a Friday, just do a casual catch-up. No talk about work. It could be something as a theme party. Why don't you ask your people to dress up today on a virtual meeting? So that's how you will be able to bridge that gap, because constantly one thing that every organization is talking about right now is that employees are disengaged because of digital fatigue. So how do you reduce that fatigue? By bringing the human side to it.
Yeah, so employee engagement is going to stay there for, I think, a long time now. Employee engagement and empathy, I think they are, going to be in the trends for 2022 and for all the coming years, right?
It's the core of what we do, and if we remove engagement and empathy from our equation, then we're just like robots giving them information which will be of no value.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing this, Neha. One must-have book for any internal communicator or podcast that you want to suggest our listeners listen to?
Definitely your podcast, Vantage HR Influencer Podcast, is something that everyone should listen to. So we got to promote this one as well. But like I said, I used to be a journalist, and nonfiction was my go-to, right? And I used to be into crime and politics. That is what interested me. So I would tell everyone who's listening that read anything and everything, listen to anything and everything, because it's going to broaden your perspective. Whether you like it or not, you will know you have a perspective even if you don't like it, right? Be open to unlearning and learn something new each day. If you don't know something, it's okay. You can reach out to so many people, and thanks to the multitude of social media platforms that we have today, right?
Very much,
you need to constantly keep learning, because what you did yesterday worked yesterday. But what new can you do today is what's going to set you apart. So
getting very dynamic day by day.
Absolutely. You cannot just rely on, one book. I know a lot of people have a lot of, one book which is their favorite, but I have so many books that I've learned from, one small snippet from Lean In or something from Ikigai. So there are so many things to pick from so many places, but what you need to do is you need to just understand that there are times where you have to unlearn things. There are times when things don't work. What worked yesterday will not work today. So how do you keep yourself on the go? How do you keep yourself relevant to the times that we are in? That's what's going to make a difference. And how do you do that? Is by opening out yourself to multiple things. And today, fortunately, we have access to so many things, so much information. There are companies that also urge you, in the direction of learning and development. They give you courses, they give you access to so many courses. And I'm coming from a company that believes in educating millions of people, and we have so many things that we're doing for learning and development of our people. And that is what is going to work. And that's what's here to stay.
Brilliant. Neha, what would be your end note or your suggestions to our listeners?
Well, I would just say that, enjoy what you do and everything will be a cakewalk. Communications is a profession for passionate people. You don't need any specific degree to be a good communicator. Trust me, I'm saying out of experience, because I have so many people on my team who don't come with a communications background, but it's their passion that drives them, because your only tool is going to be empathy. And of course, there are no right or wrong answers. There is nothing called a right or wrong in communication, because it's all about what works for you. And it's also a little bit about trial and error, right? Be more open to ideas, be more open to listening, be more flexible, be more amazing each day, and just be more than what you were yesterday. So if we are able to do all of this, we're going to have a fantastic year, no matter, what sort of a variant comes into our life. I'm sure if these are the things that we can manage, and if we can stay resilient, we stay on the course, nothing's going to be impossible.
Finally, Neha, how can our listeners reach out to you?
Well, they can hit me up on email. I'm very proactive on emails, nehavkothari@gmail.com, or on Instagram or LinkedIn. You can search for Neha Mehta Kothari on all those places. And we can chat up about anything under the sun, because I'm always open to learning, and I'm always open to sharing a little bit of what I know in life.
That's great. It was a pleasure talking to you, Neha. Thanks for all your insights, and thanks for being a part of the Vantage HR Influencers podcast.
Thank you so much, Ishmita. It was wonderful being here, sharing what I know. And I always look forward to learning more from the people around, because I think there are so many nuggets out there to pick from. And if we can just pick one each day, imagine 365 knowledge nuggets per day that you will have. So all the best. Thank you so much for having me over.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the Vantage HR Influencers podcast. Please do subscribe to Vantage HR Influencers Podcast on Apple Podcast, Spotify, and our YouTube channel for new episodes.